I uploaded a Dark Aspects episode on this game in the distant past, about 7 years ago actually, which means that if I was young Link then, I could now wield the Master Sword, so I figured it was time to completely remake the video, just like I did with my crusty old Earthbound analysis. As I replayed Ocarina of Time while taking notes, I was surprised at just how many times I had to stop and jot down a moment worth mentioning. Today, a more adult Thane is going to revisit his recurring childhood nightmare of Castletown infested with redids. There's surprisingly already a lot to talk about within the very first hour of the game. Link, who grew up thinking he was Kokiri, a species of woodland children reportedly given life by the Great Deku Tree, is called to action by this forest spirit, who's decaying because of a death curse cast by the main antagonist, Ganondorf. After entering the great deity's body and successfully exterminating a pernicious parasite, the Great Deku Tree, who acted as the only father figure in Link's life, reveals that it's too late to recover from his condition, and withers in front of the child once he gives Link the talk, about his destiny that is. Link was already rejected by many of his Kokiri peers for not having a fairy of his own until the start of this quest, but now he's shunned, because it's believed he had something to do with the Great Deku Tree's demise. Whatever, it's time to leave for Hyrule anyway, and no one can follow Link because they, as a people, supposedly die upon venturing outside of the forest. This is especially bad for them now, as the tree was a guardian who watched over the hallowed land, so when he died, monsters were able to invade the forest, forcing the trapped Kokiri to go into hiding. A new Great Deku Tree does take root later on, but it doesn't sprout for 7 whole years, meaning that in this timeline, Ganondorf's forces are able to thrive in the Kokiri's home for nearly a decade. The Kokiri can't leave the forest, but according to Fado, anyone else who enters and gets lost in the Lost Woods becomes a skeletal monster known as a Stalfos, which is the unfortunate fate of Grog, the grandson of the potion shop owner. This witch wants Link to deliver medicine she made for Grog from a mushroom he found in the forest, but knowingly remarks that it won't work on a monster, implying she has an inkling he's already turned into one. Sure enough, Fado announces what happened to Grog in a creepy way, right before laughing while asking if Link will turn into a Stalfos too. One more thing about the forest before we make the Stalchild-plagued trek to Hyrule Castle. When the Deku Tree sprout is born, it tells Link a story about the hero's biological mother. Before their king unified the land of Hyrule, there was a fierce war where Link's mom was gravely injured. Entering the Forbidden Forest, she had no choice but to entrust the child to the Deku Tree. Link never knew his late mother, or his birth father, we can presume died fighting in the same war. If you don't want to simply hear about dying Hylians, you can actually watch one perish with your own eyes. If you don't remember this scene, it's probably because it's incredibly easy to miss. The player doesn't have much need to go into the back alley of Castletown, unless you want an optional piece of heart, or black market bomb shoes. Though if you visit this side street after Ganondorf chases Zelda on horseback, but before unsheathing the Master Sword for the first time, you'll find this man, who will slowly and shakily tell you that he tried to stop Ganondorf's men after the Gerudo thief betrayed their king. Because of his labored speech, it's likely he was mortally wounded from this encounter, so when he struggles to keep his arm up after speaking and suddenly falls limp, we can safely presume he died on screen. Navi's follow-up comment further implying this with an ellipsis. Backing away from the lifeless corpse to check in on an animate one, we have the aforementioned redids that left a strong impression on a young Thane. They overwhelm the once booming Castletown when Link ages himself up 7 years by pulling the Master Sword out from its pedestal within the Temple of Time. The immediately dire atmosphere that waited outside the walls of this sanctuary came as quite the shock. My prepubescent self was not expecting the lively, friendly faces of Castletown to be replaced with these shrieking, soulless monstrosities. As a kid, I didn't know that most everyone fled to Kakariko Village, so I thought they had all become zombies, which made me run crying to my mother for comfort. She scolded me for playing those types of games, but all I could say in response was, "It's just Zelda." Similarly, when I got to Icona Valley in Majora's Mask at around the same age, I had to turn down the volume on my TV all the way, and I swear I could still hear that haunting theme through the muted speakers. This isn't even the first time you can meet the Redeads in Ocarina of Time. It's just a very evocative memory for me. The player can experience early onset trauma for themselves towards the beginning of the game if they want by heading straight to the Kakariko Village graveyard from the forest. Desecrating a certain gravestone by dragging it and entering the tomb allows a meet and greet with this lurker in the dark. They are creepy undead creatures that inhabit grim, dingy places like this, letting out paralyzing screeches so they can slowly stagger over to Link and wrap themselves around him in an attempt to bite their victim to death. Quite a few of them can be found after learning Zelda's lullaby and opening up the royal family's tomb via lightning strike, somehow. Redeads seem to thrive in this ghastly crypt, which features poisonous, inexplicable green liquid. Immediately preceding this room too is an ossuary, housing all kinds of bones that belong to what look like monsters, as well as some clearly human/Hylian skeletons, warning of the aforementioned creatures that await those who disturb the royal tomb. Getting the heck out of there and pushing past this kid who likes to hang out in the cemetery all day takes us to another petrifying point of interest, the House of Skulltula, conveniently located in the same village. This building was once home to a wealthy family who were all consumed by greed. Because of their apparent avarice, the father and his 5 sons were cursed to live as horrifying spider people so long as gold Skulltulas roam the kingdom of Hyrule. You can attack and stun any member of the cursed family by striking their weak spot with Link's sword, which elicits a cry, causing them to become temporarily hostile. Or you can, do what you're supposed to and save them all one by one to reap their, honestly increasingly disappointing rewards after the final wallet upgrade. This theme of the rich paying a different kind of price for their greed is explored later on in the series, with Giovanni of Twilight Princess selling his soul to Imp Pose in exchange for his fortune, which cursed him and his cat to turn into immobile golden statues. That's enough body horror for now, or is it? Still staying within Kakariko Village, seriously, most of the disturbing things in this game come from here, takes us to their apparent water supply, the bottom of the well, which doubles as a catacomb, besides featuring the horrifying yet standard for this game batch of enemies, namely Beamos, Floor and Wall Masters, Gibdos, Skulltulas, Bubbles, Keese, Likes, and Redeads. The bottom of the well is where we're introduced to everyone's favorite pale, supposedly blood-spattered, blobby abomination Dead Hand. I didn't make it this far into the game as a kid, but if I had, I'd probably skip the crying and go right into screaming at the top of my lungs in sheer terror at this nightmarish thing. Countless hands reach up from underneath its den, entirely composed of human skeletons, which are littered across the floor, walls, and ceiling to try and grab at Link, while its body slinks across the floor bearing a toothy, gummy smile with an ungodly taste for flesh. Stepping around prison cells, tools of torture, and an inordinate amount of human remains brings us out of the well and into the similarly unspeakable Shadow Temple, located in, you guessed it, Kakariko Village. This is quite probably the scariest dungeon in the entire series, as it was historically used by the Sheikah to imprison, interrogate, and torture enemies of the royal family. By the time of Ocarina of Time, it is taboo for the royal family to speak of the Shadow Temple and its horrific purpose, because it stands as a symbol of Hyrule's dark and bloody history of greed and hatred. Like the bottom of the well, the inside of the dungeon is literally stained with blood, some of which was censored in the 3DS remake, with several rooms containing torture devices, like hanging chains and guillotines, the latter of which working to obstruct the player. There's even a couple of saltires, also known as St. Andrew's Cross, named after the apostle, who was crucified on one in Greece, located in each, with dried pools of blood underneath them. The 3 previous temples Adult Link had to venture through were based on traditional elements of nature, earth, fire, and water, while this one is themed around shadow and death, with haunting imagery abound, ending with a ride on the foggy Ferry to the Other World, which appears to be based on Charon's ferry of Greek mythology to greet the temple boss, Bongo Bongo. Sure, that name doesn't exactly strike fear into the heart, but the steady beating of his drums sounds as if he's leading a war battle, a funeral march, or a military execution, the last of which could tie into his mysterious origin, as we'll talk about in a bit. The arena you're fighting on is the oversized drumhead, incessantly pounded by his disembodied hands that sort of look like giant wall and floor masters. Being hurled, knocked back, or simply falling off the side of the drum means exposing Link to that ghastly greenish poison Redeads like to populate around, so you won't find stable footing anywhere in this arena. The Phantom Shadow Beast reveals a weak point after the player stuns its hands, a piercing red eye protected by petal-like skin flaps. Unlike other floating hand plus eyeball monsters very common in Nintendo games too, Bongo Bongo's hands look like they were amputated, as his veiny arms end in 2 bloody stumps. In Sharia Islamic law, certain acts of stealing are considered an offense against God. The hudud, or punishment as prescribed by God, and outlined in a verse of the Quran, is to cut off the thief's hands. Like the earlier versions of the Fire Temple music with chanting that resembles a Muslim prayer, along with all of the replaced star and crescent moon symbols, is this another instance of Ocarina of Time being inspired by Islamic religion? What if Bongo Bongo used to be human, and in life stole from the royal family, so he was imprisoned and mutilated by the Sheikah tribe? Whatever the reason, I do think his hands were dismembered in the Shadow Temple, and it's likely he was later executed by decapitation too, as his eyeball here is attached to the neck, which could have been separated from the head by any of these guillotines. This would explain the boss's connection to the temple, and give an origin for this wrathful, evil spirit that had to be sealed inside of the well. The Shadow Temple makes for the creepiest dungeon in the game, as it's nothing but terrifying through and through, though I do think it's safe to say that surprisingly, all dungeons in Ocarina of Time borrow some elements of horror. Welcome back to the second part of my dark aspects of Ocarina of Time analysis. In the last episode, we dealt with on- and off-screen character deaths, the restless undead, and the deathly Shadow Temple. This time, I want to mainly sing the praises of the many other dungeons in Ocarina of Time that, while not as overtly macabre as the secret torture chamber behind the graveyard, similarly offer an atmosphere of apprehension. I'll be going through each dungeon in the order the game wants you to play them, to give a clear timeline for young Link's loss of innocence. Link's first traumatic experience is exploring the inside of the dying Great Deku Tree, to the tune of mysterious, melancholic background music. The tree's interior is filled with spiderwebs, skull-shaped spiders, and baby parasitic arachnids, birthed by this monstrous spider crab. It's up to Link to infiltrate the nest where the mother mite resides, and exterminate the demi-crustacean, though that's a challenge when Goma endlessly sends its own freshly hatched larva to attack, unless the player can destroy the eggs in time. After slashing the queen's eyeball enough times, the creature starts spurting out tears as it slowly disintegrates into nothing. It's just one of many disturbing death animations for these bosses to come. Much like King Dodongo, the infernal dinosaur who tries to take a hot lava bath to relax after eating too many lethal explosives, but is then trapped as the lava hardens after submerging its decaying body. What's especially sad is that this giant Dodongo, or what's left of it, was originally a protector of the cavern before Ganondorf's influence made it go berserk. That's the second giant dead Dodongo I've seen today. So moving on to a second living entity is another sickly guardian deity infected with parasites, Lord Jabu Jabu, Baronade, and its long-reaching electrified tentacles have rooted itself deep inside the great fish's belly. This perilous journey through the innards of a gigantic being is much more unsettling than the comparative jaunt that was the Great Deku Tree, as you're constantly reminded of the fact that Link is inside of a living, breathing thing. Accidentally, or intentionally, you bully, slashing at the lining of his stomach causes the creature to bleed blue and cry out in pain, and simply navigating through his illogical, albeit lifelike intestinal tract filled with pulsating internal organs is disconcerting. Link is able to exit through the Whale Lord's maw at any time, but it certainly doesn't look like he can from within as the teeth are constantly clenched. Apparently, before being unwillingly swallowed by the Zora Guardian, Princess Ruto would always go inside Jabu Jabu's belly since she was little. I wouldn't want to hang out in the digestive system of anything, no matter how benevolent it is, but what would I know? I think I've lost my appetite, but this has all still been child's play so far, which means it's time to talk about the big boy dungeons destined for a now 17-year-old Link. And to help me with the very first one is someone much more mature than me, my wife.
If you thought the inside of the Great Deku Tree had an enigmatic, foreboding atmosphere, then these blood-curdling wolfos with glowing green eyes welcome you to the Forest Temple, a haunted, ruinous dungeon found deep within the sacred forest meadow. Twisted corridors leading to perplexing rooms that look kind of like they were designed by MC Escher successfully hinder progress. But you shouldn't let them hold you up for too long, as giant hand monsters that hang from the ceiling wait to grab Link and pull him into the shadows. To best this baffling place, Link must defeat the four Po sisters, interestingly named after the four March sisters of Little Women, and to reclaim their flames to access an elevator, leading Link to a confrontation with Phantom Ganon. This evil spirit from beyond emerges from and travels between paintings in an atrocious art exhibit, leading to the deadliest game of volleyball this kingdom's ever seen. This fight with an illusory Ganon who peels off his face foreshadows what to expect when facing off for real.
But after receiving an indirect compliment from the real King of Thieves, Link must climb to the summit of Death Mountain and enter its crater to reveal the Fire Temple's entrance. It's a sacred place to Gorons that now acts as their prison thanks to Ganondorf, who's preparing to eradicate their entire species to set an example of what will happen to the other races of Hyrule that oppose him. Ganondorf plans to feed Darunia, and the rest of the chief's tribe to Volvagia, an ancient, wicked, Goron-eating spirit of the mountain. The Sage of Fire is actually trying to keep Volvagia contained within the temple, because if it escapes, the evil dragon will turn all of Hyrule into a burning wasteland. I briefly mentioned this in the last video, but in early releases of Ocarina of Time, the moaning as part of the background music in this dungeon is instead discernible chanting that resembles a Muslim prayer. It can be inferred that this chanting was meant to be the captured Gorons praying to be freed from Volvagia's wrath, but because this breaks Nintendo's own policy from the 90s concerning references to real-world religion, the original song was replaced. From death-dealing volleyball to barbaric whack-a-mole, it's time to save Link's sworn brothers by bashing their adversary's skull in with a legendary hammer. Unfortunately, this item does not work in freeing the Zora from a frozen fate, and their guardian, Lord Jabu Jabu, has inexplicably disappeared, so Link must enter the lakebed temple used to worship the water spirits, and quell the curse caused by Morpha, the monster who's taken up residence there, like all the other unwanted guests in their respective temples we've had to deal with thus far. Seeing as the core of Morpha is just a tiny aquatic amoeba, it isn't a very scary encounter, unless you have a phobia of deep water. I did have a friend who was a huge Zelda fan and wanted nothing to do with swimming pools, so I'm sure he wasn't too fond of a water-controlling demon. But to make up for the lack of fear in everyone else is a duel against a dark reflection of Link himself, a concept first seen in Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link, another homage, much like the sages of this game, being named after the towns from that NES classic. Apparently a different entity to Link's shadow, Dark Link seems to be a reflection of the hero born from the illusionary room that houses him. This fight is arguably one of the most memorable moments in Zelda's history, in large part due to the ambience of this expansive, reflective space. Dark Link doesn't reveal himself right away, instead appearing when Link turns around after passing a lone dead tree, and only attacks when approached or provoked from a distance. The dark doppelganger's voice is distorted and deeper than the person it's mirroring, that utilizes sword techniques mimicking the real Link's actions, with some new moves of its own, and the amount of hits it takes to vanquish is entirely dependent on the total number of heart containers Link currently possesses. This is where I would transition from a shadowy Link to the Shadow Temple, but I talked enough about that bleak place already in part 1, so let's move on to the equally unforgiving desert, where the all-female Gerudo clan put these male carpenters behind bars reportedly for trying to join them. In order to get to the Spirit Temple built by ancestors of the Gerudo people, the player must cross the haunted wasteland and its relentless, blinding sandstorm with the help of a ghost guide. The Spirit Temple itself is the only dungeon in the game that requires both young and adult Link to conquer, switching between 2 times in an attempt to rescue the kidnapped and brainwashed Sage of Spirit. Ganondorf's surrogate mothers, Kotake and Kome, control her with sorcery for 7 whole years, until Link eventually breaks the spell with brute force. A showdown with the twin witches results in their overdue deaths, as halos materialize over their heads, and they ascend to the great beyond. I would think that they'd be headed downstairs instead, but hey, I can't pass that kind of judgment. That leaves us with just one more antagonist to put in their place. The great Gerudo King Ganondorf, who spends his time waiting for the wielder of the Triforce of Courage by playing an organ, ominously, in his desolate tower floating above where Hyrule Castle once stood. I spoke about the dismal state of Castletown in the last video, but before we cross that rainbow bridge and confront the King of Evil, I wanted to mention one more character of note, the Poe Collector, with a red eye, or light, in place of his missing head, much like the phantom shadow beast Bongo Bongo. This off-putting merchant buys Poe souls from Link, praising Ganondorf for allowing a business like his to prosper. He hopes the world gets even worse than it already is, a notably similar wish made by the Hylian soldier who once stood in the same spot the Poe Collector now resides. Are they the same person then? Perhaps transformed by Ganondorf's magic? No matter how disappointed this ill-wishing individual will be if we don't lose to Ganon, and create the hero is defeated timeline, we must confront the one who betrayed the King of Hyrule to try and put an end to his reign. Again, it's a good thing we practiced volleying earlier because Ganondorf is swiftly defeated. Unfortunately though, after coughing up blood, or vomiting if you're playing a later version of the game, he summons enough energy to collapse the tower to try and crush Link, along with Princess Zelda, now released from the crystal that confined her underneath it. The pair manage to escape as the tower is reduced to rubble, but Ganondorf isn't dead yet. In a desperate last stand, he calls forth the Triforce of Power to become a towering beast simply called Ganon, with no subtitle listed under the name, which really makes him stand out from every other boss that preceded him. It's a heart-pounding clash between sworn enemies for the fate of Hyrule's future, ending with one of the most satisfying finishing blows in Zelda's history, as Link slashes and stabs the demon pig in the face with the Master Sword, allowing the 7 sages to seal him indefinitely into the void of the evil realm. And that's it. Ganondorf swears to one day break the seal, and the game ends with Link traveling back to his original time, and laying the Master Sword to rest, which closes the road between times. Then, according to Hyrule Historia, warning the young Princess Zelda about the true extent of Ganondorf's treachery, and what will come of Hyrule if he successfully enters the Sacred Realm. In order to prevent this from happening, Zelda gives Link the Ocarina of Time, and tells him to travel far away, which is good for the kingdom, but bad for Link, as he gets lost in a mysterious forest months later, while looking for his fairy companion Navi, who left suddenly and without a word. This of course sets up my favorite game in the entire franchise. The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time was already a mature take on Zelda. It was a coming-of-age story, where Link, the hero of time, was forced to come of age too quickly. In that game, Link journeyed to defeat Ganon in an adult's body, though still possessing the mind of a child, thrust into no doubt traumatic trials that'd make anyone lesser run and cower in fear. He was ultimately able to save Hyrule, but not without paying a few heavy emotional tolls, mainly his innocence and his childhood. In an effort to help her hero reclaim the latter, Princess Zelda sent Link back to his own time for good, but his experience irreversibly changed him forever. In the months that separate Link's departure from Hyrule to his arrival in the warped, parallel-like world of Termina, you could argue that we now see a grown man trapped in the body of a boy. In Majora's Mask, we wanted Link to look like a child with a touch of grown-up expressions. In Ocarina of Time, he went through some bittersweet experiences as an adult. After all, Majora's Mask does take place right afterward. Right from the development phase, it was decided that Majora's Mask was going to have a dark atmosphere, so we wanted his expression to match. So we set out to depict a character that seemed rather mature for a child. We put a lot of shadows on him. That's partially because of an overseas comic that I was a fan of at the time, Yusuke Nakano. This overseas comic, as revealed in a 2005 Nintendo Power interview with the man, was very likely Hellboy, as he was especially into that series when he worked on Majora's Mask. The intense use of shadows for all character art really makes the influence clear, and fits what Majora is setting out to do, considering the fact that both this game as a sequel and its world can be considered the dark shadow of Ocarina of Time and Hyrule respectively. Instead of having Link carry a simple wooden shield, or an oversized metal one like a turtle shell this time, Link was given new gear, better fitted for an accomplished knight. The hero's shield is reminiscent of the Hylian one, with a few notable differences, like the bird motif. Instead of a loft-wing-like creature with its wings fully spread, the avian was replaced with a more reserved owl. Using a nocturnal bird was, in the words of designer Yoshiki Haruhana, a deliberate choice, because the world of this game was on the dark side. My favorite piece of concept art is an early drawing of Clocktown from the imagination of Nakano, created to emphasize the many creepy masks that would appear in the game. There are masks with distorted faces hanging on trees, masks with long pointed noses and sharp, barred teeth, silly masks with a psychedelic flair juxtaposed with sinister ones, and what looks like a person hanging from a twisted branch. A lot of the architecture that made it into the final game is interesting and weird, but judging by this art piece, and all of these unused sketches by Takuya Imamura, it's clear that Termina could have been much more surreal and uncanny, especially this translucent flower, with what looks like a human-esque fetus inside of it. There may not be any schnoz-shaped plants or floating vine-covered rings in the actual release, but the dreamlike world of Termina awaits nevertheless. And now, it's time to talk about that world's history. The four giants are the guardian deities of Termina, who once lived with the land's people in harmony. However, on one day during the annual Carnival of Time, which celebrates the passage of time and the year-to-come harvest, the giants revealed that they were going to take on a more passive role as protectors, each of the four taking 100 steps in opposite compass directions from Clocktown. They were to enter a perennial slumber, awaking only to assist when called to answer a crisis. The Skull Kid was heartbroken by this news, as he was a friend of the giants since before they had created the four worlds. Feeling betrayed, the childhood companion acted out of spite. He spread his anger across all four worlds, repeatedly wronging all people until they sang a song of prayer, the oath to order, for their gods to help. The Skull Kid's intention was likely to draw out the giants so that he could see them again. But this backfired, as instead of addressing the people's plea in person, they simply answered with a roar, declaring loudly that the Skull Kid was to be banished from their land. Frightened and filled with even more sorrow, the dejected imp returned to the heavens and harmony was restored to the four worlds. Okay, well, Granny's story took some creative liberties at the end there. What actually happened is that likely sometime after the Skull Kid's banishment, he met the fairy siblings Tattle and Tail, while taking shelter from the cold rain outside the walls of Clocktown. Bonding through this shared painful experience, the fairies stuck with their newfound friend, only to regret it later, when the Skull Kid's mean pranks turned into crimes. And once he wielded the power of the eponymous Majora's Mask, those crimes quickly turned into evil. This accursed artifact granted the childish demon abilities surpassing that of his old friends, the giants, who shunned him. And so he imprisoned each of their spirits within other dark masks worn by monsters who have claimed each region's sacred temple. Now, with no gods watching over the land of Termina, the Skull Kid's heightened malice has taken over completely, as he uniquely curses all corners of the map, sending most every one of the world's inhabitants into a downward spiral of hopeless depression, before ultimately eradicating them all under the weight of a falling moon. Why would the Skull Kid pull the moon out of orbit, to send it on a slow-burning crash course that'll eventually kill everyone, including himself? That's because the Skull Kid isn't tapping into the mask's power to do his own warped bidding. The mask is now, and presumably always was, in total control, using its host like a puppet to fuel an insatiable desire to elicit insurmountable suffering. The mask revels in the all-encompassing, overwhelming paranoia of an inescapable doomsday hanging over an already dying world. While the exact origin of the mask isn't exactly clear, we are given details as to what it was initially used for: sinister hexing rituals performed by an ancient tribe. It is said that a tremendous, wicked power is bestowed upon the one who wears the mask, which is implied to have happened at least once before, because, according to the mask's most recent owner, the Happy Mask Salesman, the troubles caused by Majora's Mask were so great. The Ancient Ones, fearing such catastrophe, sealed the mask in shadow forever, preventing its misuse. That tribe from the legend has since vanished, but it's very possible that the Happy Mask Salesman himself is a descendant, due to his unmistakable resemblance to the mask-trading moon children, which helps explain how he got his hands on this forbidden item. The Happy Mask Salesman's true intentions are never explicit either. After apparently going to unspecified great lengths to acquire the infamous mask, he could sense the doom of a dark omen brewing, that unwelcome feeling that makes your hair stand on end, and yet he was in all probability the one who brought it back into this world from eternal darkness for his personal collection. I don't doubt that the mask itself, sensing the Skull Kid's perpetual distress, is what lured the imp in to steal and ultimately put it on. But could this have been what the mask salesman wanted deep down? To indirectly release an uncontrollable evil into the world? To see the mask's true potential realized with his own eyes? I personally don't think he's a purely villainous mastermind or anything like that, but I do believe he's some otherworldly being who is swayed by the dark desires of his heart, lamenting the consequences only after it was too late, which is one of the reasons why he so desperately begs the time-traveling Link to get it back for him. The Happy Mask Salesman isn't exactly thrilled that the evil has left the mask at the end of the game after all. He's the perfect example of a morally ambiguous character done right, showing both good intentions, as well as a more devious side, like the aforementioned mystery of how he initially came into possession of said mask, along with the tendency for sudden, violent physical outbursts. So how exactly does this inexplicable fellow help Link? Well, it's best to start from the very beginning. Wandering through an unfamiliar, fog-dense forest leads Link to an ambush, where he's robbed of the precious Ocarina of Time, and his beloved horse Epona. This is the face of someone who's been through hell and back, and does not want to have to deal with some backwoods punk tooting around with a priceless memento from Zelda. After an unsuccessful rough-and-tumble chase, Link shows off an acrobatic expertise apparently honed by his adventures in Hyrule, before literally and figuratively tripping into the world of Termina. The Skull Kid casually reveals he got rid of Link's stupid horse, and then, using some kind of black magic channeled through the mask, transforms Link into a lowly Deku scrub. According to an Iwata Asks interview, this sequence was apparently finished the morning following a nightmare Zelda producer Eiji Aonuma had, in which a Deku chased him. He woke up screaming, and was understandably shocked to see that when he made it to work that same day, Takumi Kawagoe had prepared a cutscene that coincidentally mirrored Aonuma's dream. Satoru Iwata jokingly suggested the possibility that Aonuma may have been possessed during the game's development, an idea that interestingly comes up a couple of times in this discussion. First, Link has to go back to being a child after getting accustomed to an adult's body, but now he's cursed to take on a kid form that isn't even human. On the way to Clocktown is a gnarled tree, distorted from what looks like a Deku scrub. Tattle comments that the way Link appears right now sort of looks like this tree. It seems dark and gloomy, almost like it could start crying any second now, which is a sad detail that's important to remember later, as we eventually learn that Link's transformation masks contain the spirits of the deceased. The Goron mask appears after healing the ghost of Darmani III, a proud Goron warrior who died investigating an unnatural blizzard blowing from Snowhead. The Zora mask materializes after healing a dying Zora hero's soul, Mikau, a legendary guitarist who was fatally wounded after a run-in with merciless pirates. The Deku mask is shed from Link's curse after he himself is healed by the Song of Healing, learned from the Happy Mask Salesman. This to me hints at the idea that the Skull Kid's curse did not just turn Link into a newly created Deku scrub from nothing. It instead stole the life essence of the closest Deku scrub around and forced it into Link. We know this particular tree doesn't just look like a Deku scrub, it was one, as it's heavily insinuated that this is what's become of the Deku Butler's missing son. Goron and Zora Link are nearly indistinguishable from Darmani and Mikau respectively. Most everyone thinks these characters are alive and well, so long as Link wears their skin. There are rare exceptions though, one of them being Toto, the manager of Mikau's band, the Indogogos. If Link dons the Zora mask and speaks with him, Toto is at first startled to find Mikau standing before him, but then dismisses the notion, while remarking on just how much they look alike. Similarly, the Deku butler is very much reminded of his own son when he sees Deku Link, but understands that they are not the same person. During the end credits, he is seen kneeling and shaking before this lonely tree, possibly having just discovered it, crying and mourning the death of his son. This is made obvious enough with in-game context clues, but if you're still not convinced that this tree is the contorted, petrified corpse of the Deku Butler's son, then this official Nintendo Miiverse interview with the Happy Mask salesman directly suggests it. In the last episode of The Dark Aspects of Majora's Mask, I spoke mainly about the mysterious origin of the namesake mask, and its demonic dominance of the Skull Kid, who's snuffing out the breath of life in Termina from the outside in. Today, I'll be talking about the many ways this corrupted imp's death curse has already sowed its seeds across the ill-fated land, and how that land's people fare in the blanketing shadow of an ineluctable falling moon. The Deku tribe's royal palace resides in the southern swamp. Known for its diverse plant life and abundance of fresh flowing water, the once sacred Woodfall Temple is located at the heart of the Deku swampland, though it's now become a monster's lair, and a sunken prison for one of the four giants the Terminians worship like gods. Its spirit is trapped in the dark mask of a towering jungle warrior, with the power to summon entrapping rings of fire and control all manner of off-putting insects. Adolwa is responsible for spoiling the pristine waters of the wetland with a fetid poison monsters can thrive in, putting the now uninhabitable swamp and its citizens at risk of extinction. He also kidnapped the Deku Princess, an evil act that sent the Great King into an unfettered frenzy. Now consumed with rage, he groundlessly blames an innocent monkey his daughter befriended, and threatens to punish the poor thing without a trial as he's helplessly tied up in a cage. Link can visit the royal chamber in his Deku form and watch as the kingdom collectively prepares for the monkey's undeserved punishment. Normally, before anything actually happens, the moon falls and punishes everyone indiscriminately, but if Link sneaks past the guards and into the prisoner's cell, the pitiable primate will teach him a song used to raise Woodfall Temple from its depths. The king overhears this not-so-secret jam session, and takes the monkey's knowledge of the song as incriminating evidence the convict deceived his daughter to enter the temple. This expedites and prolongs the monkey's punishment, which we can now see for ourselves if we head back into the palace from here. Physical torture is on the menu, as the unfortunate ape is repeatedly dunked into a vat of boiling liquid. Before each scalding dip, he'll struggle and beg the all-too-enthused servants to stop, but it's all for naught, as he's submerged, then left immobile and speechless upon surfacing. The king dances to celebrate this wrongful vengeance while the butler desperately pleads with him to calm down, and for the great lords to save them all. Heading into the opposite compass direction brings us to the mountains in the north, where breezy springtime has suddenly become a brutal winter for the Gorons. Their domain is now doomed to be smothered in snow and ice forever because of Goat, another beast wearing a giant-sealing dark mask the Skull Kid trapped his old friend's spirit in. A cold, harsh wind is blowing in from the tower-like temple of Snowhead, the lens of truth revealing the source to be the temple guard Big Goron, turned invisible and brainwashed to keep anyone from entering with his big lung capacity. I didn't realize this as a kid, but it's made obvious to me now that Darmani, the fallen hero Link assumes with his Goron form, whose ghost tells us he died when he was blown off the cliffside, trying to investigate the unnatural snow flurries, was inadvertently murdered by the bewitched Big Goron. The mountaintop turned tundra nearly takes the lives of several other Gorons too, who are all freezing and on the verge of collapse, if not frozen solid already. The western ocean the Zora clan call home is becoming inhospitable to fish due to rising water temperatures, which means trouble for the local fishermen, but especially for the Zora, as their main food source is dwindling.
The Skull Kid has also provoked the neighboring Gerudo pirates, telling them that Lulu's eggs are the key to entering Great Bay Temple, where untold treasures wait to be plundered. Their avarice motivates them to pillage Zora Hall and steal the eggs, which shocks Lulu into a catatonic-like state and results in Mikau, who's stated to be her lover by the Hyrule Encyclopedia, venturing out to take her, and what's implied to be his, unborn children back.
However, his courageous quest prematurely ends at the hands of these thieves, who leave him fatally wounded, floating face down near the shoreline. Link watches as Mikau gives his final breath and fades to dust, leaving behind another transformation mask, so that the regrets of this Zoran hero who died before his time can be fulfilled.
Baby!
Speaking of ghosts, the haunted eastern canyons of Icona and its blood-drenched history don't support many life forms besides monsters. But that doesn't stop a supernatural researcher and his timid daughter from living in the spectral wasteland. The father's curiosity turns to negligence when he falls under a jinxed well's spell after recklessly exploring it, and transforms into a hideously half-mummified creature that can only stagger around and moan in agony until Link heals his human heart. Pamela keeps her undead dad boarded up in a basement closet, and screams if Link tries to attack him, stopping what would be manslaughter by jumping in front of his blade. The music box that normally plays a song to drive away these mummified men called Gibdos has stopped working, so a swarm of them circle the house indefinitely, demanding the release of their friends, thinking Pamela's father is one of them. Pamela keeps the house locked in fear of the Gibdos taking him away, so Link has to cause a ruckus outside and break in when Pamela carefully heads out to investigate the well. The Song of Healing is what saves her father and turns the evil magic into a mask, which can be used to speak with Gibdos, but also perpetually torment Pamela by reminding her of the recent trauma. She doesn't want Link to meet her resuscitated dad because the academic doesn't remember his time as a demi-Gibdo, and seeing Link's strange powers will only encourage him to conduct more crazy research. She's just a little girl though, and you're a hulking Goron, so meeting the man despite her misgivings is no problem. True to what she feared would happen, her father's ghost radar reacts fiercely to all three of Link's transformations, since they all contain spirits of the deceased. Besides this tormented family of two, the greedy thief Sakan, a forgotten wounded soldier, and the faint-hearted gravedigger, nobody lives in Icona Canyon. This land, where only the dead roam, was once a thriving kingdom. It's now skeletal soldiers still loyal to their king and captain even long after death. Icona was subject to attacks from an enemy nation, Garo ninjas who continue to haunt the region as spies, with an unquenchable thirst for blood. The Skull Kid thrusting open the doors of the stone tower let a darkness through that left the decayed soldiers of Icona spellbound to continually linger and fight petty battles in their afterlife. Captain Skull Kita, commander of the Stell Children, was shamed in life by loss in a battle within his kingdom, and grants Link his soul, a mask of course, resting in a fiercely burning flame after the boy proves his worth. Skull Kita has not been able to leave this world in peace. So to finally rest eternally, he asks Link, who's now become his successor, for permission to take leave, and for Link to convey to his men that the war has ended. With the newfound authority to lead an army of Stell Children, Link can command them to open up a few of the graves belonging to the Icona royal family. He can also scare the living daylights out of the poor gravekeeper by speaking to him while donning the captain's hat. Dompe will run a lap around the cemetery, eventually locking himself in his shack. That's mean though. So let's force the actual monsters. I definitely didn't behead for fun to destroy a headstone leading to another soul that needs saving. Flat, a composer who served the Icona royal family. Apparently, his brother Sharp sold his soul to the devil, and trapped Flat inside of this tomb. In Majora's Mask, he is the one who re-teaches you the Song of Storms, explaining that he composed it to cleanse his brother's cursed black soul. The 1,000 years of raindrops the song brings are his tears, and the thunder it summons to strike the earth is his anger. This fraternal song, not the Song of Healing, is what effectively breaks Sharp's curse, after the soulless apparition plays a lethal melody of darkness, so that Link may join the ranks of the dead. Swamp, mountain, ocean, canyon. I've talked about these 4 areas of Termina, and the problems they each suffer from because of the Skull Kid, but now it's time to discuss a much more universal issue. The giant chunk of rock hanging above everyone, set on a collision course straight towards Termina's core, Clocktown. And it is such a brilliant plot device for character building, because every single person has a different reaction to this crisis. Most of the Carpenter crew, preparing for the annual Carnival of Time, ignore the mass panic and refuse to believe it truly will crush them all, with their leader stubbornly staying, after his subordinates flee to stare down the moon in its glowing red eyes until it kills him. The town's gate guards, honorably yet reluctantly, stand by. An order from the mayor their captain nearly breaks down accepting. They know what's coming, but the guards cannot leave their posts, and must come to terms with their untimely deaths. Much like the postman, who so desperately wants to take refuge, but will not leave until he's given the blessing, these diligent service workers stand with their hands over their hearts, waiting for a higher power to save them. They also have to watch with pain in their hearts, as children continue to play in the streets because they have no idea what's going on. The Master Swordsman of West Clocktown boasts about being able to cut the falling moon up into pieces, assuring Link that no one should worry as long as he's in town. The Swordsman's School is normally open 24 hours a day, but in the final hours of the final day, he'll kick Link out so that he can unite his spirit to cut the moon. The door isn't locked though, so turning around and heading back inside reveals a signpost in place of the warrior, explaining that he'll be on vacation for a short while and to not look for him. This might be enough to deter some players, but you're actually able to bypass the sign by climbing onto the otherwise inaccessible platform, leading to another area of the dojo, a secret room located behind a wooden plaque in the very back, where the swordsman can be found curled up in a fetal position shaking, exclaiming, "I'm scared, I can't take it, I don't want to die." That's terrifyingly real. But then you have folks like the more collected Mr. Barton, the sort of fellow who'll stay at his business through thick and thin, standing at his counter like always to serve the milk bar's specialty, Chateau Romani, for what he calls the final moon viewing.
Romani was practicing for tonight. Tonight, they're coming. They come at night every year when the carnival approaches. They come riding in a bright, shining ball. A whole lot of them come down. And then they come to the barn.
Aliens in my Zelda game? These cadaverous creatures, appearing for the first and only time in Majora's Mask, are foreigners to the franchise and to Earth. They have no known names associated with them, and are referred to only in non-specific terms like them or ghosts. Romani, a young girl who was given the same name as the ranch, is seemingly the only one who knows of their existence, and their practice of unwelcome annual visitations. Cremia, the ranch manager and Romani's big sister, of course doesn't believe what sounds like the creative delusions of a child, and will not heed her warning, despite her younger sibling diligently training with a bow to safeguard the both of them, and their home. The bigger problem here though is that the piercing blow of an arrow can only briefly stun and set these ever-encroaching invaders back to their starting points. It is solely the light of the morning sun that will vanquish the threat, so without the support of a more seasoned archer to subdue them until the crack of dawn, Romani will be overwhelmed by the ceaseless pursuers as they successfully reach their target and take her, along with the cows she was trying to defend. Romani will be missing for the remainder of the night, until she alone is dropped off in the now unoccupied field. It's a great thing she's returned safely, but something is very unwell. Romani is not her usual high-spirited, playful self at all. She instead aimlessly wanders around, occasionally stopping and staring at nothing with empty eyes and a vacant expression, as if her body is here, but her mind is still back wherever it was she was taken upon being captured. She's completely unable to say anything for the first day she's returned, and then speaks only in simple, fragmented sentences afterwards as she struggles to remember what she's doing, and who exactly she's speaking with, even if she already met Link prior to this conversation. The implication is that the aliens completely erased her memory of them and anything related to the incident, including Link. In her stupor, Romani will place her hands over her head and start shaking back and forth. This is likely a physical sign of her stress and desperately racking her brain but failing to find an answer, and perhaps indicative that whatever mind-wiping procedure or other experimentation, though there's no evidence of that, she had to endure was painful. Even if this isn't the case, being abducted and held against her will was no doubt traumatic. So perhaps fleeting flashes of what happened are entering her mind and shocking her system. Like a nightmare you're sure you felt but can't recall in detail. Whatever the case for her turmoil, Romani is left in catatonia, while her sister is utterly defeated. With a racing, pensive mind reflecting deeply in anguish, she'll no longer react to the falling moon, or to the masks that would normally get a rise out of her when worn by Link. On top of the precious cows inherited by their father being stolen, leaving both her business and legacy in shambles, she holds herself accountable for whatever scarred her little sister, because she wasn't there to protect her. I still don't think Cremia believes it was a supernatural cause, and that they were all pulled away by a tractor beam. So I'm sure once she calms down and attempts to uncover who's truly to blame, she'll naturally suspect her seedy competitors, the Gorman brothers, as the culprits. An entirely grounded claim, considering their direct efforts in sabotaging Romani Ranch by spitting false allegations about their rivals' milk products being watered down, and assaulting Cremia en route to Clocktown by attempting to destroy her cargo. Link can bear witness to and help fend off the thieves firsthand, but it is implied to have happened once, if not several times already, as Cremia knows what to expect when she's fenced off from the main road and has no choice but to take a detour through what she calls ugly country. What's more, when they're committing atrocities, the Gorman brothers wear masks to disguise themselves as Garos, the spirits of ninjas cloaked in darkness that are supposed to haunt just the Icona region. The brothers' exploits are infamous enough that there's now been many strange sightings of Garos near the ranch, based on a rumor that they frequently appear there. These cowls make the pair of them look like ghosts, so Cremia has to presume these repeat bandits are what Romani was scared of, and that may convince her the Gormans are responsible for this recent tragedy, if she, for whatever reason, hasn't yet realized that they are the ones under the masks. Getting back to the actual so-called ghosts that invade Romani Ranch, it's now time to talk about the surprising real-world cryptid these enemies are based on, the Flatwoods monster of West Virginia folklore. The fact that Majora's aliens were designed after various depictions of this specific alien sighting in America isn't exactly new information, as the story of the extraterrestrials' apparent arrival in the Mountain State has influenced several other video games before and since, but I wanted to learn more about this phenomena from the source. So during the holiday season of 2021, my wife and I hopped in my car and drove from our place in Tucson, Arizona, all the way to Braxton County of West Virginia in search of answers, to visit a museum in downtown Sutton dedicated to them. Meet the Flatwoods Monster, also known as Braxy, the Phantom of Flatwoods, which, along with its shadowy appearance consisting of drape-like folds as described by one of the very first eyewitnesses, is perhaps why Romani refers to them as ghosts. The head of the Flatwoods Phantom was apparently shaped like the Ace of Spades, and had large, glowing yellow eyes that cast beams of light upon where they looked. Their in-game appearance matches this more popular interpretation of the Flatwoods monster from the initial report rather than the second sighting, in which its witnesses described what they saw as less ethereal and more mechanical, with a metallic body, possibly as a sort of armor housing the creature, like its depiction in Fallout 76. Though the design of them from Majora's Mask was definitely based on the original illustrations of the Flatwoods monster, there are many similarities in behavior to the unrelated Hopkinsville goblins, who are also apparent aliens that originated from Kelly and Hopkinsville, Kentucky, and provided the basis for Sablei's design from the Pokemon series. Like the Flatwoods monster, these goblins have large heads with yellow glowing eyes and clawed hands, first discovered as a light descending from the sky and landing on a farm. Notably, the legend states that the witness and his family fired at the goblins with rifles and shotguns, but the impact from the bullets only sent the creature back a little bit as they collected themselves and reportedly resumed floating towards the family. This parallels what happens during the invasion at Romani Ranch, when Link fires arrows at the ghosts. A direct hit seems to destroy them at first glance, until they reappear seconds later from where they started approaching from. As I mentioned earlier, the morning sun is their only true weakness. Just as the Hopkinsville goblins supposedly had an aversion to light, they were said to have tormented the family that night until sunrise before disappearing. This also may be a coincidence, but the victims were both rural farmers and carnival workers. Not dissimilar to Cremia, who delivers the ranch's dairy supply to Clocktown's milk bar as they all prepare for the annual Carnival of Time. Anyway, they behave like the Hopkinsville goblins, while more closely resembling the Flatwoods monster. What's most interesting in all of this, though, is the fact that these tiny towns tucked away in and around the east coast of the United States host stories about them that have persisted, and have intrigued Japanese creators enough to be inserted into their games. The executive director of the Braxton County Visitor Center and founder of the Flatwoods Monster Museum, Andrew Smith, who I actually met in person, said one Japanese visitor came to the museum after seeing this drawing her whole life, but only just learned about its origin as an adult. The museum does attract Japanese tourists specifically too, to the point that there's katakana written on the front window welcoming guests. I say the influence West Virginia and Kentucky had on Japan, which runs deeper than just this myth, is surprising. But with the country's yokai spirit-centric culture and love of all things alien, it's no wonder there'd be intrigue about overseas supernatural oddities. Plus, I suppose it's no different than a person like me, becoming inspired enough by Eastern video games to make a YouTube channel devoted to them. That's enough prattling on about cattle nappers though. Let's say you save Romani by exposing them to the light, and then make Cremia's muggers cry by wearing a mask that reminds them of their third brother who left home. Striking them in the face infinitely with arrows while they're too depressed to fight back doesn't help either. After a warm and fuzzy hug you could get used to, we have just one trouble-free day remaining to spend with these ranch sisters. Well, trouble-free if you don't look up at the sky. Cremia's friend Anju from Clocktown, whose betrothed mysteriously left her before the wedding, and her family have taken refuge at the ranch, despite the mother thinking her soon-to-be son-in-law is cheating on her daughter with Cremia. The ranch is certainly farther away from the moon than the town's clock tower the celestial body is nosediving into, but none of the ranch's locals actually think they're safe here either. Grog, the owner of the Cuckoo Shack, accepts his death with the sole regret of not being able to see his chicks in their prime as roosters. Mamamoo Yan, proprietor of the Doggy Racetrack, asks Link what he's doing here and if he'll be okay, while Cremia herself outright states without a hint of optimism that they aren't safe at the ranch. Like Grog, she makes peace with her death, explaining that there are some things in life that you can't change no matter how hard you try. Her little sister, on the other hand, is completely oblivious to the impending doom, expressing zero concern about the incoming moon and the increasing intensity of the earth tremors. Surely because she hasn't asked about it, Cremia carries on her usual duties with a smile for her younger sibling. Just because she knows they likely won't be waking up in the morning doesn't mean Romani has to. Cremia asks Romani to sleep with her in her bed tonight, which is already heartbreaking. But it's made worse when the two go in for the evening and Cremia hesitates to say, "See you tomorrow," while Romani exclaims it happily as if nothing bad is going to happen. If you think that's dark though, let's rewind to their conversation during the final day. As a bit of background, Chateau Romani, aka Milk of the Night, is the milk bar's most popular beverage, specially delivered from Romani Ranch. This highly desired forbidden milk is sold exclusively at the grown-ups only establishment, so Link must provide proof of membership, Romani's mask, a symbol of adulthood, to get in during regular business hours. The third Gorman triplet I alluded to earlier left the Gorman family ranch to pursue a career in the entertainment industry. But upon hearing the news that his troupe's Carnival of Time performance has been cancelled, he heads over to sulk at the bar and proceeds to drown his sorrows in Chateau Romani. He acts like a stereotypical drunken man by hiccuping and drawing out his words before explicitly asking if it's possible to get tipsy from something like milk. There's even an added quest to cure his hangover the following day in the 3DS version. The point in me explaining all of this is to make certain everyone knows that without question, Chateau Romani is alcoholic. In understanding this, the final day exchange between Romani and her older sister becomes all the more heartrending. On the night of the final day, Cremia is letting her sister try Chateau Romani for the first time. Romani was always told before this to wait until she's an adult, so why now? Well, I think this could easily mean one of two things. The first is that Cremia, knowing their grim fate, simply wants her younger sibling to experience a taste of this special drink she's been looking forward to while she still has the chance. The second, which is a much darker implication, is that Cremia is planning to get her sister slightly intoxicated so that Romani won't feel anything when she dies. While they won't be directly crushed under the weight of the fallen moon all the way at the ranch, the fire of its devastation will reach them, likely burning everyone alive. That's quite the downer to leave things on. Let's pour one out for Cremia. But the next dark aspects of Majora's Mask will be the night of a new episode, focusing on the shady Sakan, and his role in the greatest Zelda side quest of all time. Anju, the innkeeper at the Stockpot Inn, is engaged to Cafe, the son of Clocktown's mayor. The two were to be wed on the day of the Carnival of Time, honoring a timeless tradition of Termina, based on a legend that if a couple is united on the day of the festival, and dedicates a mask as a sign of their union, it would bring luck. It has become a custom for each person to bring a handmade mask to the annual carnival, so in preparation for their wedding, Anju crafted a mask symbolizing the moon, which waits on a mannequin in her bedroom along with her wedding dress, while Cafe built a mask representing the sun. They were to exchange these homemade masks on the big day, a promise they had made to each other in their youth. But because of some major setbacks, namely a certain imp and a thief, Cafe and Anju will be kept apart if Link does not intervene. The first reason for this is that Cafe has been magically transformed by the power of Majora's Mask. Much like Link's unique predicament after returning the Master Sword to its pedestal in the Temple of Time, Cafe still possesses the mind of an adult, but he's now trapped in his childhood body. While taking advantage of the now helpless Cafe, Sekan, the local pickpocket, made off with his precious ceremony mask. Because of this event, Cafe sought out his old friend, who secretly runs the town's only black market, which the mayor is fully aware of and is implied to be a patron, by the way, as the owner is apparently a bad influence on him. Anyway, this seller of stolen goods recognized his longtime friend in his young body, and agreed to let Cafe stay in the back of the curiosity shop and spy on its customers, knowing Sakan is likely to stop in at some point before the carnival. Probably as to not arouse suspicion, Cafe dons a popular children's character mask, and tells no one about his plan, or where he's staying, including Anju. Most everyone assumes Cafe either impulsively wanted to break off the marriage, or that he simply got cold feet and left town. Some correctly believe he'll come back because he must have had a good reason for taking off so abruptly, while others, like Anju's mother, know what it's like to put unfounded faith in a partner's return only for it to backfire, as her own husband abandoned her and never looked back, so she thinks it's foolish to trust Cafe's word. Her mother's got an inkling that Cafe's having an affair with Anju's best friend Cremia from the ranch, since Cremia would have a lot to gain in business support from Cafe's mother, the mayor's wife. This of course isn't true, which makes for an amusing interaction when you talk to Cremia wearing the mask Madame Aroma gave you to investigate her son's whereabouts. But it's nevertheless wild to think about the sensitive topic of adultery appearing as a crucial story moment in a Zelda game. If Link makes no effort to find Cafe in any given time cycle, Anju will naturally become more and more depressed as her fated day approaches. She will always receive a letter from Cafe in the afternoon on the first day, and while we can't see the contents within, we can safely presume it doesn't reveal as much information as she'd like, such as where specifically he's hiding out. The curiosity shop owner and the postman are the only two in town who know exactly where to find him. Without Link's support, she won't have the courage to write and mail back a response herself, and she will not hear from him again. So on the second day, she perhaps ironically heads over to the laundry pool, where the door to the hideout is located, and cries because she's afraid to meet him, and to hear the reason why he wanted to disappear. She'll then have a conversation with her mother that evening, and without proof of Kafei's return, she'll be convinced to leave their promised meeting place in Clocktown to go with her family and take refuge at the ranch. Her mother will be relieved, though admits she's been a little harsh on Anju, who covers her face, holding back tears as she agonizes over the ordeal, understanding that it's too late now for things to turn around. On Kafei's end, unless Link stops Sakan from robbing the old lady from the bomb shop on the night of the first day by retrieving the stolen goods, or blowing them up, which kills Sakan, I am not joking. This is a Zelda game where you can straight up murder a man. Sakan will always arrive at the curiosity shop on the night of the second day to sell the pilfered bomb bag, and Kafei will always follow him once he leaves to discover Sakan's hideout. He'll then wait there until the sealed entrance is opened, so that he can retrieve his wedding mask, which will not happen without Link's assistance. Clearing this quest requires mailing out Anju's letter as Link, then meeting Kafei, and passing on to Anju the pendant of memories he keeps around his neck, which is enough to convince her to not follow her mother's advice, and to instead hold out for Kafei in town. It is only helping Kafei steal back his mask at this point that ensures a happy ending for them. If the player secures the mask but forgot to deliver the pendant, which again conveys Kafei's intentions to Anju, she'll be gone by the time Kafei arrives, with just barely a couple of hours remaining until the end of the world, so he'll die alone. Alternatively, if the pendant of memories is passed along, but Link doesn't help Kafei, he'll be helplessly stuck there until the moon crashes, which means Anju will be the one waiting patiently in her bedroom until she dies alone. The player can witness what happens too if Link presses the switch allowing Kafei to progress further into Sakan's safe house, but doesn't get to the mask before it's lost forever. The mask is kept in what I assume is some kind of bulletproof glass, housed on top of a conveyor belt, which Kafei will always accidentally activate, eventually releasing this priceless prize through a trap door and out of their reach so that Sakan can make his escape. It's a setup where the many doors leading to the room the mask is headed stay locked unless certain switches in each preceding room are pressed, requiring two people working together quickly to best. Another big problem is that while the impenetrable security system is active, the doors are one way and close upon entering. So once the two attempt to beat this elaborate trap, there's no escape if they fail. For Kafei, that is. Link can simply use his magical ocarina and warp himself to safety outside of the hideout, but Kafei has no means for exiting, and becomes a prisoner in his enemy's secret base with no choice but to dejectedly wait for his own demise, knowing very well that he let Anju down. The beauty of this complicated side quest is that there are so many different outcomes to experience, so many different possible timelines in which these two do not wind up together. What's especially tragic though is successfully reuniting this lost couple, only to be forced to play the Song of Time and rewind the last 3 days, undoing all of that development with nothing but a memento remaining to prove you did it. That's the brilliance of this game at large. It is designed so that you cannot save everybody in one single time cycle. Even if absolutely every other trouble is resolved, you will reach a point where you have to either save the old lady from the bomb shop, or let her be mugged, so that Sakan has something to sell to the curiosity shop, ultimately allowing Kafei to spot the mugger and chase him down. If you don't want their love to be doomed to another fallen timeline, you could always save this quest's completion right up until Link is ready to confront the Skull Kid, leaving the unified couple's room and bolting straight to the clock tower. With all 4 of the Terminian giants freed gives you the opportunity to stop the moon now. And what a process it is. While we wait for this cutscene to play out, I must interrupt to talk about today's sponsor, Vapor95, a vaporwave-themed apparel company based in the US, with collections inspired by nostalgic 90s internet and retro video games. These are the sweatshirts my wife and I picked out, but there's plenty more on my wish list, like these incredible Ghoul Boy and Dream Cube designs by Beach Ghost. If you use this special link, which I'll also be putting in the video description, it will auto-apply a 15% off discount code when you check out. That's enough maundering though. We're running out of time here, so let's have Link play the Oath to Order, which summons every giant from their guarded regions to help pause this thing's descent. 1, 2, even 3 giants aren't enough to halt this flaming chunk of rock. It takes the effort of all four to keep this moon, that, if you believe is a conscious entity, never wanted to fall in the first place, as evidenced by its own tears, suspended safely above the tower. But that safety doesn't last for very long. The mask reveals itself to be sentient, and disconnects from the Skull Kid's face, coldly dropping its host's limp body onto the ground like garbage. This event, while unprecedented to Majora, is only a temporary solution. Taking matters into its own figurative hands, the deranged mask flies into the gaping mouth of the moon to possess it, proclaiming its intention to consume everything, as it pulls itself towards the clock tower with unnatural vigor. This causes the giants a great deal of struggle. They start bellowing, and their arms begin to shake as they desperately try to keep it held above their heads. As the hero of this story, Link of course trails the mask, entering the moon's maw to confront it for the final battle. For those of you watching who haven't finished the game yet, I want you to imagine what the inside of the moon looks like. Cavernous, dark, confined. All words that should come to mind, right? Well, this game's interpretation is the exact opposite of what you'd expect. Link is transported to a surreal, open field with a boundless blue sky overhead. Rolling green hills occupied by fluttering butterflies and children playing around a single tree paints a peaceful picture that works to be far more disconcerting when juxtaposed with the anxiety of just a few moments ago than a more quote-unquote realistic approach would have felt. The tranquility of this liminal space and its inhabitants raise many questions with many potential answers. There are 5 total moon children. The 4 running about are all wearing the dark masks of the bosses that once trapped the spirits of the giants, who are currently keeping the moon suspended. The 5th child, who sits alone at the base of the tree, now dons Majora's mask. What's incredibly interesting is that behind these masks, the children all closely resemble the happy mask salesman, and even ask Link if he too will be a mask salesman. They all speak slowly, with ellipses, wanting Link to give them masks and teleporting him to their assigned moon dungeons to play. Like this is all some sort of twisted game, which may very well be a reflection of Majora's mental state. These kids will get offended if you offer them anything but a mask, and if Link is wearing a transformation mask when speaking to any one of them, they'll sternly direct Link to take it off and to show them his real face. Upon clearing their dungeon, the respective lunar child stands waiting in a creepy toddler's room, and leaves Link with philosophical questions about doing the right thing, happiness, friendship, and what his true face is before disappearing entirely. All happy masks earned from helping Termina's people must be given away to these kids, until they're satisfied enough to leave Link and the lonely child to face each other one-on-one. Because Link has given away his happy mask collection, the child now suggests they do something else, handing over a new mask imbued with dark power, so that they can play a game of good guys against bad guys. Link is the bad guy, and when you're bad, you just run. That's fine, right? In Japan, the fierce deity's mask is called the Oni or Demon Mask, transforming the boy into Demon Link. According to the Gossip Stone across from Sakan's hideout, the fierce deity mask contains the merits of all masks, a fact that's backed up by the game's creator and director, Eiji Aonuma, who said in an interview with Game Informer, when asked whose soul resides in the fierce deity mask, "The best way to think about it is that the memories of all the people of Termina are inside of the fierce deity mask. We don't know why the child wearing Majora's mask gives Link this ultimate mask with power rivaling that of Majora, but it can be speculated that Majora either wanted itself destroyed, or that the dark power of the fierce deity could somehow corrupt Link and continue its reign of terror. All we know about Majora so far is that it is an entity of immeasurable destruction that sadistically feeds on the suffering of others. Its terminal goal was to eradicate everyone in Termina, but it wasn't content to just drop the moon without any planning. Majora had to strategically make each individual miserable first, then savor the accompanying apprehension and depression felt by them all before Link arrived. And it was able to do all of this as a mask. Thankfully, during the fight, we see what might be Majora's true form, and the tendencies that hint at what exactly it is. During the encounter, the monstrosity's base form, Majora's mask, releases tentacles from its fleshy back that hang down like hair, which has horrible implications in and of itself. What if the mask had latched itself onto the Skull Kid's face in this way? Or worse, physically controlled him via tendrils reaching into his brain. After sustaining enough damage, its yellow glowing eyes darken for good, as it spins around to the center of the arena, starts violently shaking, and suddenly sprouts veiny appendages to become a lengthy bipedal creature called Majora's Incarnation, with the mask now acting as the creature's chest. This gangling form reveals a more erratic, childish, and unhinged side to Majora as it frantically runs amok, unpredictably prancing around the room, and occasionally stopping abruptly to fire orbs of energy at Link, then quickly bolting away before it can be caught. It screeches upon being hit, thrashing its arms down on the ground as if it's having a tantrum. It sings when it's dancing, and uncomfortably laughs while incessantly flailing its scraggly arms and legs. The music is both whimsical and sinister in a manner that's entirely unsettling, hammering in the idea that Majora may be less collected and more insane than we'd initially been led to believe. This all builds up to the final form Link must face, Majora's Wrath. It possesses characteristics of the first two incarnations as a muscly biped with whip-like tentacled limbs for arms, and emerging from its neck is a frightening, monstrous face with horns protruding from its head. Majora's Wrath lets out a feral roar when it's born, but once the unholy beast is bested, it cocks its head up to the crumbling ceiling and starts disintegrating, as it bursts into brilliant light, and the moon presumably loses its freaky face, teleporting back to where it should be. Either that or it vanishes forever, but I don't think so, because on Earth at least, life without a moon could be almost as disastrous as a falling one. Before the credits roll, the Happy Mask salesman comments about the evil having left the mask in a way that suggests he's upset about it, and then proceeds to depart by disappearing. This isn't some strange technical glitch either. His vanishing was a deliberate choice, since this also happens in the 3DS remake, supporting the idea that he does possess some kind of supernatural ability. The post-credits screen reads "The End," but once you reset the game, you'll see that all of Link's masks are back, including the Fierce Deity mask, though it can only be worn in major boss rooms. Now that the world-ending crisis has been resolved, I suppose it is as good a time as any to talk about what exactly has been happening to Link as he puts on these transformation masks. From the Fierce Deity to the Deku Scrub, before Link takes another form, there's sound effects that play that sound to me like the mask is latching onto his face, or worse, breaking and reconstructing his bones to fit the new form. As the screen goes dark, he'll cry out in pain before screaming in agony, looking straight into the camera with unique, unforgettably disturbed faces. In his Deku Scrub form, Link stares into your soul with shocked, bloodshot eyes. As a Goron, his frowning mouth opens up as wide as can be, presenting an exaggerated set of pearly whites. His Zora form shows us enlarged, cracked black eyes with his sharp, fanged teeth on full display, and his transformation into the Fierce Deity reveals another look of horror with his mouth agape and pupils dilated. According to a Nintendo official Miiverse thread interviewing the Happy Mask salesman, the reason why Link screams during these transformations is because the boundless sorrow surrounding each mask comes rushing inside the wearer when they put it on. The urge to scream is quite understandable, really. Game Informer asked a similar question to Aonuma in 2015, who had this to say: "We're talking about masks that were created to contain the memories of people who have died. Often, there are things they really wanted to do before they left this world, so becoming them is actually really painful, because it's like hosting a really powerful spirit that's coming into you." So with that said, how many times do you think Link transforms in one run-through of the game? Hundreds? I personally have Link put on and take off the Goron mask every other minute just to get around Clocktown more efficiently. So in my playthroughs at least, the poor kid is stuck suffering like the rest of the locals until Majora is defeated, and I put the controller down. I like to think that with his power to endlessly reset time, he at least takes the occasional 3-day cycle to get as much rest and sleep as he needs. But that also means the people in that timeline are haplessly doomed. Much like my other favorite video game, Mother 3, the more you think about the world of this game, the greater it becomes. Okay, that's all the time I've got. I gotta get back to playing The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask on my Nintendo Switch. But before I end this for good, I'd like to do a rapid-fire round of all the minor dark aspects I wanted to mention but couldn't fit anywhere else in the video. Number 1. According to a gossip stone and the item's description, The all-night mask is a torture device of insomnia, forcing its wearer to stay awake even if they want to sleep. Number 2. You can sell Lulu's rescued eggs to the curiosity shop for a measly 20 rupees, and sell pictographs of her to a stalker fan taken while she's too depressed to do anything else but stand and stare out into the sea. Number 3. According to an entry in her diary, Anju's grandmother feigns senility as an excuse not to eat her granddaughter's food, because apparently it's just that terrible. Number 4. After saving the swamp, mountains, and ocean, one member of the Deku, Goron, and Sora tribe respectively will comment that despite their region being saved from its curse, they still have an inexplicable bad feeling, which can refer to the fact that the Deku butler's son, Darmani, and Mikau are still dead, or to the falling moon. While they may be sheltered from the panic in town, there's apprehension hanging in the air, no matter where in Termina they reside. Number 5. Shiro. This forgotten Clocktown soldier has supposedly been here for many years, sitting on his bum, waving his arms around and asking for help, but everyone ignores him and passes by. Likely because he's been carrying the stone mask, which has the power to make its wearer blend in with their surroundings and become as unnoticeable as stone. How this immobile soldier survived in the arid region of Icona for so long is beyond me. But hey, after a red potion he thinks he feels better. Number 6. The most well-known glitch in Majora's Mask is commonly referred to as the 4th day glitch, which can be easily executed by gazing into any telescope, waiting out the timer until it almost hits 0, then pressing B. You'll know that it worked when, well, the moon doesn't fall, and the regular music for that area starts playing again, rather than the final hours track. I thought this was worth bringing up because while the moon is no longer a threat as a barely visible speck in the sky, the fact that most every NPC in Clocktown tied to a schedule is missing makes for a newly unnerving atmosphere. I had a lot of fun playing around with this glitch via the Switch Online version of the game, because you can create a suspend point moments before the moon hits to explore Day 4 at any time with the push of a button. Besides the absence of townsfolk, there are some creepy discoveries to be made, like camera transitions and text being gone, along with gossip stones trying to display the time remaining with garbled text. This one even laughed at me, using different voice clips from Egos to Ekana and his servants. Then I entered the Swamp Tourist Center and the game crashed. Fun fact, while the glitch is active, if you dive into the waters of Great Bay Coast, you'll see the oceans turned this sickly red color, while the sky stays a dark purple, with exception to cutscenes, even on the moon. And number 7. Speaking of Icona Castle, this is the location where Link learns the Elegy of Emptiness, a melody played to shed a shell of himself, or of his current image, to create soldiers with no heart. The statues left behind are all off-putting in their own ways. Darmani is depicted with the scar on his belly, which I always presumed he got from fighting Goat, or when he died falling off of Snowhead. His eyes are completely white, just like Mikau, and the Link statue has become widely recognized as a symbol of what I think is the best video game creepypasta out there, Ben Drowned, which was actually revived somewhat recently, and turned into a fascinating alternate reality game. Thank you to anyone who stuck around until the end of this video, and to all who watched every episode of both Dark Aspects of Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. If you enjoyed this series, please be sure to subscribe and blow up that notification bell with a powder keg, so that you don't miss out on a new Dark Aspects upload. With all that said, I'm headed out of town. I've been told the nut brown beauties are waiting.